So I thought I would make a little bit of a fun video today, so I compiled a list of 8 things that bipolar people can probably relate to. These things range from things that we might experience every day or things that happen once in a while but definitely strike a nerve. The first one that I'm going to mention is something that may not happen very often, but it is distasteful jokes from others. People sometimes are a little inconsiderate when talking about bipolar, or they don't really understand it, and they kind of just throw around the word and make jokes about it like they don't really care about the people that may have it around them. Um, for an example, when I was in community band, there was this composer that had bipolar, and we were playing music by him, and I think there was a mistake or two in the writing, and then they made a joke about, oh, he was bipolar, and then something like that, like that's why it's so messed up or whatever. And I was just sitting there like, okay. Like, I didn't know what to say, I didn't know how to react in my head, but I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna like let that slide. I'm not even gonna think about it. But there's things like that where they're just like generally inconsiderate about the way that they're using that. They don't think about the fact that people actually have like bipolar disorder or like this condition that is real, and they're just not very considerate of that. The second thing is something I've mentioned before, but not knowing when your next manic episode will slip through or when your next depressive episode will slip through, and being kind of like worried about it, or at least thinking about it to the point where you can't just forget that you have bipolar. You have to always be thinking, always be on top of things, always just hoping it doesn't happen and doing your best to make it not happen. Um, the next thing, the third thing, is when manic episodes do happen, you end up doing a lot of weird and crazy stuff that you regret later. And usually, after manic episodes, you get depressed for a while, and that is the worst time because you're just thinking about all these things you did when you're manic, if you remember them, and you're like, oh, why did I do that? Oh my gosh, like that was so embarrassing or whatever. I have so many stories, especially like at U of I, where I'm around a bunch of college kids and I just do weird stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so weird, sort of thing. um I'm gonna have to like link some videos to those stories because I'm not gonna go through all of them right now, but there would be times where I'd be running for hours, and sometimes with only a like normal bra on, not a sports bra. But that was one of the stories I told. I messaged weird things to people like numbers and stuff. I was really into angel numbers like every time I got manic, and it's just not great for me. Another thing is losing friends because of things you did when you're manic or things that you said when you were manic. That's a pretty sad one because, like, I don't know how many times I've tried to make friends and they were relatively newer friends, and then I would get manic and said a bunch of stuff or was inconsiderate or whatever, and it was just too much, and then I got blocked. um I was unfriended and whatever, and it was just really sad. I like came out of mania like, wow, they just blocked me and unfriended me and everything, and it was just not something that I want to go through again, but it may happen again. Um yeah, so those all went together. This one's kind of like a switch, but there's a period that you don't accept your diagnosis, that you kind of don't want to take meds, you don't really accept that this is gonna be the rest of your life, sort of thing. And I think sometimes it comes and goes for me. I used to think I was accepting of it like late high school, but that turned out not to really be the case. Like, I went through some periods after high school where I didn't want to take meds, or I was like embarrassed to, or I didn't want to tell people that I was bipolar. So there's also that. I think, okay, I'm doing this in a weird order, but this one kind of goes along with the distasteful jokes. It's just like flippant remarks in relation to bipolar. And also, this happens a lot in songs too. And it kind of like touches me in a weird place. Like, I know that sounds weird, but like, it strikes a nerve in that it's just thrown around casually. I know that there's like a few songs that just use the word bipolar casually, and I mean, it's true that it can mean more than one thing. Like, there's, say, bipolar cells in the body. I forgot exactly where it is, but I remember like thinking about that, and there was a time in my life where anytime I heard the word bipolar, I was like, I cringed a little inside. um and I think that went along with not accepting my diagnosis, but there were a lot of songs that had bipolar in them. And I remember this one time in middle school that someone was just singing one of those songs and they said that. And I was going through a hard time at that time, like with drama, and she said the word bipolar in the song, and I immediately like started crying and just like immediately had a mental breakdown right there. And I couldn't stop crying. They made me sit out in the hall, and after a while, after not stopping, they sent me to like the counselor or whatever that they had there, or social worker. But yeah, it was like one of those things. And then like later, a bunch of the popular girls were talking about me because it was one of those girls that said that in the first place. And so yeah, I had a mental breakdown, and then after that period, I saw them whispering about me in the hall, and I was like really upset about it. But there's something I can do about that now. That's something that's like a long time ago, but sometimes those memories just stick with you because they had a pretty big impact on like your life, and just at least at that time. The seventh thing that I was going to mention is wondering what your true personality is, because with all the mood swings that you can have with like the mania, the depression, you kind of wonder like, am I outgoing? Am I reserved? Am I like a person that always wants to stay in and just like do stuff alone? Do I want to be social all the time? I know those all mean the same thing almost, but like a lot of times I like switch between like ENFP and INFP, and I feel like I attribute that to my mood swings and what I'm feeling at the time when I take that. And I'm like, yeah, I would like be comfortable doing that, and like other times I'd be like, no. I know that's like not necessarily something that would be only for bipolar people, but like everyone has their social days and they're not social days. But you can wonder a lot, like, what am I truly like inside if I didn't have bipolar, and what would that be like? The last thing I'm going to mention is something that I feel like a lot of people who watch my videos are interested in because they get the most views, but it's bipolar relationships. And that's like I think everyone kind of goes through this thing where they read a bunch about bipolar relationships and other people's experiences, and then they read the percent, like 90% of bipolar relationships fail, and you're like, wow, I'm doomed. I do not have a chance at all. But I wouldn't say that's the case. Like, there's a lot of relationships in general that go south and end for whatever reason, and being bipolar makes it a little bit harder, I feel like, in the sense that you have to be more on top of yourself and the other person has to help you out with it, which is a little bit more of a responsibility for the other person than in a normal relationship without like all the extra like disorders and stuff. But it's not impossible, and I forget what the percent is for other relationships too, but when they like throw out percentages like that, you just gotta think about like all the people you know in your life and how many relationships they've had in their life, and be like, there's if they're in a relationship right now, that's only one that's working out of all of the ones that they've had in the past. And people like date like any like I don't know how many, but I feel like okay, let's see, like maybe 5 is an average amount, because you like date people maybe starting in high school, and they may not be very serious relationships either, but I feel like that would count as like a relationship that didn't work out. So when they say 90%, there's still those that do work. And I know that that's not very good odds. Like if someone gave you odds of like 10% to live in a surgery, you'd be like, those aren't very great odds. But if you do what you need to do to be well in a relationship, and you have someone who would be willing to help you through it as long as you are willing to help yourself, I think it could be like you could be that 10% that works. And just, yeah, that's all I gotta say, I guess. Those are the 8 things that I believe are really common to think about as a bipolar person. I hope you related to some of these, and if you did and you got this far in the video, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next week. Bye.